Oh, you brought the bell. I figured it was probably over on the table.
I brought it over. So, wow.
Well done.
We are now live on Facebook, our first live podcast.
Yeah.
And it took some doing.
It was super easy to figure it out.
We
know
we were gonna
now.
We wanted to start at 11, but it's now 11:36. It took us a while. We had to learn a new app. I mean, it's 2020. All we're doing is learning new apps. It's always a new app. Everything requires a new app.
You're right, and we learn the apps pretty easily. The trouble is covering the distance between different companies and the technology that they make, because it's rare that anything's intuitive. It's rare that things sync up, you know so much more about this than I do, but it's like if you try to share a YouTube video onto Facebook.
Yeah, they don't like that.
Facebook does not like that very much at all. And it seems like there's a lot of apps that way. But hey, I'm glad that we're up and running. I'm glad you figured it out.
Yeah, you helped me. B.live is the app we're using. I just got B.live this morning when I figured out how can we go live on Facebook. And we've been doing these remotely. I mean, you're in Indiana, I'm in Tennessee right now, and we've done this before by Zoom call and then later put it up. But now this is the first time. And we are, in fact, I'm a little skeptical. You actually have your phone out, and we are on our Facebook page right now. You verified that, right?
I'm pretty sure. Let me look here.
I deleted my Facebook app on my phone because I didn't want to keep getting dings. And so I have to literally log in on my computer to get Facebook. So I've done that purposely to try to isolate myself from all the...
Sure. I had to silence the message notifications because I'm from such a big family and we have all these different groups. It's non-stop, man. It's all day long. But I'm pretty sure that we're up and going. And things have been pretty well, right, Tim?
Well, yeah. Well, I've been living the dream. That's what people ask how you're doing. That is always my response. And because that's how I feel, I'm so fortunate. God has blessed me way beyond what I deserve. And I am literally, living the dream. Now, do I have a perfect life? No, but I am so fortunate on so many levels, health-wise, and financial-wise, and woo!
You're cool.
Is that Emma?
That's Emma. She's losing it. The ever watchful eye. Nothing gets past her ever.
So anyway, yeah, I'm so fortunate, and I thank God every day for His blessings.
Sure.
Things are going well. How about things up in Indiana?
Things are great. We've navigated some pretty murky waters this year, about as well as I think we possibly could. It's been interesting because, with the lockdown, getting to spend so much time with family, I think it's kind of recalibrated a lot of people in a certain way to get them back to how things used to be and probably how things should be. When I was little, it was always Sundays. Sunday was the big family hangout day. And every day of lockdown's been like that. Every day of lockdown's been like a Sunday. So, there's blessings that have come with it in many ways. It's been trying, but at the same time, as a society, I feel like we're way, way, way too busy. And, there's data to back that up. And we've talked about before some of the, depression rates, suicide rates, deaths of despair that exist here exponentially more than they do in other countries. And I think it's just because we're pushed down on so much. And I hope that, there's kind of a reset that happens from the lockdown, and that many people figure out what it's really about. I've heard a handful of people make those comments of, I figured out all of a sudden that possessions or having things isn't as important as, being around my people or whatnot. And I think that could be one of the blessings that comes from the craziness that's been 2020.
Yeah, it's been the most eventful year, I think, in my lifetime.
Sure.
That I can recall. You know what? I know we're live right now, but I just realized that I want to turn my light on. So you entertain the folks while I am gone.
You want me to do a dance? Should I do a backflip?
Do a TikTok dance.
Uh-oh. Yeah, TikTok. This is how I dance right here. We finished. I'm not allowed to do that dance in 36 states. It's illegal. I did a TikTok dance. They were.
Oh, I missed it. I'm going to watch the replay.
The whole time we were gone, they were hollering their name.
Well, yeah. I mean, first we had COVID-19. Well, first in Nashville we had the tornado. We both had some very disruptive things in our personal lives.
Sure.
Before that, and then the tornado, and then COVID-19, and now all the unrest and protests and rioting, and our country is very divided. And there's some really strong opinions out there, and we've talked about it in our podcast already about. And you wrote a song about the Right Away. Phenomenal song.
Thank you.
What's the title of that song? It's I Can't Breathe, right?
Yeah.
So check it out, people. It's on Facebook. Do you have it on YouTube yet? You need to put it on YouTube.
I don't, man. I haven't actually really demoed it yet. Whenever I wrote it, we were all over it. We had the thing up literally right after it came out.
Yeah. It was just your iPhone.
I played it through the iPhone and stuff.
So yeah, a lot of emotions are coming out. It's a high emotion time, and we're highly divided in this country. And it pains me for all of the divisiveness. And I think, I feel that COVID-19 and the protests have worsened the divide.
I agree.
What do you think? I mean, it's just strengthened.
I agree, but oftentimes, change hurts, man. Change doesn't come without any kind of pain, usually. And my hope is that all of this isn't for naught. I hope that the protest isn't like the last 50 protests that have happened, to where things just go back to the way they are. I hope that we get real change on a core level, because we've talked about it before in our podcast. There's policy in place that puts many people at a disadvantage in our country, and in my opinion, the trouble is that there's a huge base of white Americans that are oblivious to it.
Yeah, I saw actually. I'm following. Okay, there's a string. So I love travel and I love food, and I found a new show on Netflix. Well, it's not new. They're already on the second season, I think, or maybe third season. Restaurants on the Edge, and it's like bar rescue, restaurant rescue.
I love that show.
Have you watched? Oh, Bar Rescue, yeah.
I haven't seen Bar Rescue. That dude is awesome.
He is awesome.
Yeah.
He's got that no nonsense New York, New Jersey vibe.
Straight up New Yorker, man. You don't have to guess where you stand with that guy.
And this is, you don't have that strong of a personality in there, but it's got three people. One is a restaurateur, one is a chef, and one is an interior designer, Karen Bohn, Bohn, I think is how it's pronounced. And I've watched 2 episodes so far. One was on Malta. I was actually confession, I was looking at whether or not Malta will accept Americans this year on vacation because I want to go there after watching that episode. Malta. I mean, actually, I was actually reading in Acts today. I read my morning Bible study, and Paul was shipwrecked on Malta. I was reading that this morning, so I'm really fascinated by Malta, and I have not been there. I do want to go to every country in the world, and that is an independent country. It's not part of any other country. Anyway, so Karen Bone, who is the woman on the show who does the interior design, I've been following her on Instagram since I started watching the show, and she wrote about the 13th, which is a show on Netflix that came out in 2016. You'd already seen it, so I'm behind. And I watched that and was so impacted by it, even though it's 4 years old. And I sent you a clip, the one clip where the one guy's talking, and it could have been done after the George Floyd protest, but it says all of these protests that have been going on, and he named all of them. There were more than I even remembered. There was, the Watts riots in the 60s. There were like 4 or 5 that he mentioned. Rodney King and Ferguson. There have been protests all along, and now George Floyd inspired. And he said every single one of them, this is even before the George Floyd thing happened, were inspired by police brutality. And it was like he could have been made after the fact. And if you haven't seen 13th, I highly recommend that you do for its perspective. And it talks about how the 13th Amendment was passed, and people suddenly, you had an economic problem. The South was racked by war. A lot of everything had been destroyed, going through all the very destructive war, all the people that died, soldiers, and they had relied on the African Americans as slaves, as workforces. Suddenly they didn't have that anymore, and they had to try to find a way to rebuild. And so out of economic necessity, they found there is actually a loophole in the 13th Amendment that says everyone will be free unless they commit a crime.
Sure.
And so they found that loophole, and they started arresting black men specifically for any kind of crime they could come up with, vagrancy, insignificant crimes, and putting them in prison workforces, and were able to circuitously get the work that, not all the work, I don't think they ever got back to the workload or the workforce that they had before, but replaced some of that. And that was the institutionalization of African American black men being criminalized.
Sure.
And then it really stepped up in about 1920s when the movie The Birth of a Nation came about, and it was a silent picture, and it was actually highly lauded by society. Woodrow Wilson, the president, said it's a phenomenal history lesson. But what it did is it vilified black men as being these sexual super predators, and that's where some of these stereotypes came about. And actually, the Ku Klux Klan membership had been waning, and after that movie came out, they put ads in the local papers, and membership just skyrocketed.
Sure.
In person. So these are some touch points in our society, and ever since then, we've just had. Well, you know this, but I'm saying this for you watched the movie. We've just made African American men specifically they have this image of being the super predator, and so now African American men are 6.5% of our population, but over 40% of our incarcerated people.
Yeah, there are more African Americans incarcerated now than there were slaves in the 1800s.
Yes, that's right. So, and it's not just, I mean, they're at the tip of the spear, but they're only 40-some%. I mean, we incarcerate more people than any other country. We are like 3% of the world's population, but we have 25% of the people who are imprisoned.
And now it's privatized.
One in four of all the people in jail are in the U.S. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, and now it's privatized, and many of these prisons are privatized. So now it's literally slavery all over again. I mean, human beings as a business commodity.
And it's in the 13th movie goes into that and describes how so many avenues of it. It's the people who build and maintain the prisons. The concessions. Aramark. I was in the food business.
Oh yeah.
Aramark was a big. In fact, there's an office just down the street here. Aramark must be a regional office, and they're big distribution for food, and they service a lot of prisons, and I'm sure that's huge business because everybody's got to eat 3 meals a day, and institutional, food, that's big business. So there's lots of lobbying goes on. There's ALEC organization, ALEC, which has been around, and it's where corporate executives sit down at the table with lawmakers and draft bills for them and actually write it out and give them, especially at the state level. I mean, it's really eye-opening how this is a system. Like we talk about the military-industrial complex, this is the prison industrial complex, I guess you could
Big
say.
time. It's a war on a base of Americans, and if that's what needs to come out of this whole thing, is we need to address the core of the core of the issue. Right. It's not an isolated thing. Too many people are saying, well, but what if this, what if that, talking about the George Floyd incident. It's so much bigger than that. And it needs to be addressed on a core level, on a structural level. Things need to get better.
Well, I like to go on Fox News and engage in debate on the forum on there. And I posted these statistics that I just mentioned, and the guy said, well, maybe, just maybe, actually was willing to be open-minded, this individual. And he said, maybe, just maybe, blacks commit more crime at a higher rate than white people. And he mentioned even, the fact that there are no fathers at home. Well, one of the problems is when you have such a high percentage of your men in your subgenre, in your grouping, your ethnic grouping, are not in their prime working years, 20 to 50, are such a high percentage of them are locked away and they're unable to father their kids. They're not actually father them, the sexual aspect of it, but father them in that fathering them as they grow up, that kind of fathering I'm talking about. Not able to be there for their kids as their kids grow up. And that just makes the problem, it's just a continuing rolling thing that makes it more difficult as a group to pull out of that. And when you have crime, and when you have, you're surrounded in an area that is a poor area and there's lots of drugs, and it's like we talked about it, the Native Americans in Pine Ridge in South Dakota. I mean, if you grow up and all you know is every adult man that you know is an alcoholic and molests and rapes, I mean, it's a major, 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 major problem out there. What are the odds that you're ever going to grow up to be anything other than that? That's the only
the policy isn't designed for reform. If you're week to week and hanging on to pay the bills, all it takes is that one thing, you lose your driver's license and you can't drive to work. Then what? Then you're driving on a suspended license so you can feed your family. And then what happens after that? Then you're in even more trouble. I mean, there's too much policy that's not designed for reform.
Hey, we had Jimi Humphrey just made a comment on the thank you. How you doing? Thanks for watching. How you doing? Anyway, so yeah, we're trying something new, Jimi. We're going live. Hopefully we can do this ongoing every week. We didn't get it done on Monday, and we're supposed to start at 11, and we're
editing, right?
Well, better late than ever, I guess. So yeah, these are issues, and I keep seeing these snippets. People are not afraid of pulling their phone out and watching stuff, and I'm seeing things that just boggle my mind. Little interactions, like there was the one of the woman in the convenience store, and she's screaming at this young black woman, telling her she needs to go back where she came from, and they get into each other's faces, and the young girl, well, probably teenager, I don't know how old she was, she slaps her, and the woman was so taken back. And then there was one I was reading this morning of a music producer, a rather large black man, who was waiting in line prior to, he was first class because he's successful as a music producer, and he's a very large man. I've seen the pictures. And this woman behind him was saying that you don't deserve, I mean, why are you here? This is the wrong line for you. You need to make way so we can get through. And she would never have understood that he had money, that he literally was successful. That was something that she couldn't enter her mind. And so it's amazing that we have people in this world of 2020 where there's so much opportunity to educate yourself, that are people that have, I didn't realize that it's as common as it seems to be.
Sure. And that needs to be peeled back, man. You know, those people, for it to get better, those people need to be called out. That whole ugly underbelly needs to be peeled all the way back, and that's the first step to getting things better, getting them to where they are fair.
Yes. Yeah. Well,
it's not going to happen overnight.
You have to shine a light on things, and we need to have a conversation about it. And on the other side, I mean, people are saying that not all cops are bad. Absolutely. I mean, police officers put their lives on the line. They have a tough job. I mean, leave to go to work. I mean, they could get into an altercation and somebody pull a gun on them and shoot them. I mean, yes. Sure. How many jobs are there where that is happening? That is a possibility. When you leave in the morning and kiss your wife goodbye, or your husband if you're a female police officer, and you know, there's a chance, hopefully not a very high chance, but there's a chance that something could happen. And how many of us, somebody that has an office job that's not in the equation.
Those guys got a tough gig, man, and you know, you can support them, and you can support them and say that most of them are good people and most of them are stand-up people, and support equality for everybody.
Right.
It's not a sides thing, and that's what's disturbing. Is that it's like a lot. I wouldn't want to be in law enforcement right now. I wouldn't want to, and I don't know anybody in law enforcement that is not a stand-up person, and I know quite a few of them. But it's a hard time for them, for sure. And most of them, we all know, most of them are just doing their job and just doing the right thing. I mean, there's a small group of bad people in every walk of life, and that's not to say defending actions that are absolutely uncalled for. But maybe it is time to assess, how hard is their job really, man? I mean, they're flung into any situation you could possibly imagine, and split-second decisions change people's lives or result in death. I don't know. When people say defunding the police, it sounds so radical and so crazy, but I almost wonder if it wouldn't be better to have not defund the police, but, you know, if it's somebody that has mental issues, why can't the police show up with a therapist or something like that instead of just that reaction? I feel like a lot of people end up in jails, and especially now, there's no resources for people that have mental illnesses. There's too many of those people that end up in jails, and that's not going to help them. I think it's time that we reassess it, you know, because
I agree.
Not just from the perspective of individuals that are getting arrested, from the perspective for the sake of the police as well. Because some of them have an impossible job, man. Impossible. If you're in a really, really violent part of a city, it's just a matter of time, you know, before you're going to become desensitized to a lot of different things and not respond the way that you would respond as a human being on a regular basis. So I don't think it's really, I mean, not where I'm at. I'm in Madison. It's all gravy here. But I could understand, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of police officers running around right now with PTSD that have no idea that they have it.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, like you said, who would want to be, I mean, imagine being a police officer now, and you know, it's like the Vietnam veterans that came back after Vietnam, and they were spit on and called baby killers, and And all they were doing was they were drafted, most of them, and most of the people who went to Vietnam and served there were working class. I mean, if you were in college, you were able to get a deferment, and there were all kinds of loopholes to get people with money. People with money didn't go unless they literally wanted to.
They never do. I mean, they never do. It's always the poor people that fight the wars.
Yeah. So, these people were just doing what they were ordered to do. They were just being soldiers, and the pain that came with that. I mean, those Vietnam veterans are still carrying that. I mean, there's been a lot of attempts to maybe make it better. And now, we've got, you ever see someone traveling on a plane, person first class will give them their seat. Thank you for your service, all that stuff. And that's good that we recognize how important that is. And it should be the same thing for police officers, law enforcement. So, but there's a conversation that has to be had and an understanding. And I think this individual I was having this conversation with, he was saying, well, he said because maybe African Americans have more commit more crimes than other races. Maybe that's one reason why they're more incarcerated. You can't blame 100% on the police. And I said 100%. I do not blame the police for that. Near 100%. They're really foot soldiers in a system is the way I view it. Right. I mean, they're just really executed they're like the soldiers that went to Vietnam. It's got to be addressed at a much higher level, I feel.
Right. It's a socio-economical thing in many ways.
Yes. So the police are the foot soldiers that are at the tip of the spear, so to speak. And yeah, there are police officers. I think most adults can say they've had experience where maybe they interacted with an individual who happened to be a law enforcement officer that perhaps seemed to love his job and the power of his job a little bit too much. And maybe the reasons they got into law enforcement was not to be a public servant, because they're supposed to be public servants, and they got into law enforcement because of the power it gave them. I mean, wouldn't you say that there are? I mean, most people have had an experience with an officer like that, perhaps.
Sure.
But that doesn't mean the majority of them are that way.
No, they're not. I mean, the majority of them, I believe, get into it to try to serve. They get into it for the right reasons. And how many of them get into it for the right reasons and then become completely desensitized because they see things over and over and over and over and over. And next thing you know, this person isn't the person that they used to be all of a sudden because they've seen so much, I don't know. I don't know what it feels like to do it. And I'm sure it's different all over the country. I would imagine being in that line of work where I live versus being in that line of work in parts of the country where there's, really, really high homicide. Two different, Chicago right now, man. I seen the thing. It broke my heart too. I saw the thing this morning that Buddy Guy had Legends boarded up.
Oh, I didn't know. I didn't see that.
So they don't tear it up, and it's like, man, Buddy Guy, he shouldn't have to do that. Buddy's still fighting that same battle, and this is a guy he's been here forever, and he's been fighting this his whole life, and he's still fighting the same battle in his own backyard. It's sad, man. It hit me a certain way when I saw that. I was like, dude, this ain't right. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But it has to be talked about, I mean, we might not have all the answers, but I think it's important that it needs to be talked about because people are falling into different groups and different sides, and people are becoming very compartmentalized and saying, well, if you are on the right side of it, then you think this, and this. And that's not a good thing for critical thinking. Everybody is being placed into different groups. And I think there's a big danger in that.
There is a big danger. I mean, I read this morning that there was a group call of all the aldermen of the different wards, and they're having a call to the mayor, and they're complaining and they're saying my ward is a s-hole, and I mean just they're one of them was crying on the call. I mean, Chicago's in a really bad way right now.
Yes,
A
it
lot
is.
of violence, and I mean, okay, so if I'm a police officer in Chicago right now, and all of this is being said across the national airwaves, almost make you ashamed of being, someone could have some feelings if you're sensitive. I mean, I'm kind of ashamed of my profession because of the way everybody's talking about it. And suddenly you're being asked, the mayor says, we need you to go in force into these war zones of these particular wards. I'm like, are you kidding me? After everything that's going on, I mean, what police officer is going to want to do that? So it is not an easy problem. It is a very complex problem, and we need to work together. On the other hand, I've heard numerous times by African Americans saying that in some of these neighborhoods, when there's something bad is happening, they literally have a thought process where, should I call the police or would that make it worse? Could you imagine? Which way should I go?
I have been in parts of the country where they won't come. There are parts of America where you can call them, but they ain't coming down there. I don't know if it's still that way, but there were parts of Louisville about 5 or 6 years ago that were like that. I know for a fact. And there were parts of Memphis that were that way too, where they ain't coming. You know what I mean? Because it's like, it's just that bad.
Yeah. And then would you relay the story that you had of when you were in high school, if you would, about the first time when you're with your black friend?
Yeah. It was the first time that I'd ever seen it. And it was kind of a awakening for me. I got pulled over with a buddy of mine. And
in
my car, I was driving. He was big guy, black guy. And he was scared to death, dude. And I didn't understand why. It was the first time I'd ever seen it. By way of, it really is different for me than it is for him. And he was terrified, and I didn't understand. I was like, dude, we ain't doing nothing wrong. We don't have anything to worry about. And he was like, you don't understand, man. He was like, I'm a big guy. I'm a black guy. He was like, anything could happen. And that would probably realistically never happen in Madison, Indiana. But he's seen that imagery in his lifetime. He'd seen that. He'd seen, people that looked exactly like him getting their ass beat or getting shot by police officers, and it was imprinted into his brain. And that was the first time I'd ever experienced it and looked at it from a different perspective and thought, what really is different for him than it is for me. And I was oblivious to it, and many people are. And again, I think to wrap it up, that's the last thing I want to say about it is that a lot of things need to get better, and they can get better quickly. But what needs to happen in order for those things to get better quickly is you're always going to have bad people on any end of the spectrum. There's always going to be bad cops. There's always going to be bad white people. There's always going to be bad black people. There's always going to be bad people everywhere you go. The bulk of people are great people. For things to change and get to where we really have equality, most white people are oblivious to how bad things are. If they're made aware of it, I believe in the goodness of people. I think if most white folks that don't care right now realized how swayed it is one way or the other, they would be like, this is unacceptable and it needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
That's what needs to happen. That level of awareness needs to be raised. And those people that are just oblivious to it, because there's too many of them. And I tell friends all the time that say, there's no such thing as white privilege. And I say, well, let's talk about the 13th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. People don't want to admit that there's privilege. But, the important thing is, we might not have all the answers, but the important thing is that it's out there and it's being talked about, because it needs to be. People need to be more informed about it. People need to let go of their fears. There are too many kind of set in their ways that I almost feel like the government should force everybody to travel as soon as they graduate school. It's like, just
I've said that, yeah.
Go be around people that don't look like you, and realize that everybody's the same, and then that fear goes away and everybody's cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man.
Well, what can we come up with a subject that is a little lighter? I don't have one, but do you have one? Can maybe we've talked about this for like 3 podcasts.
Music.
Tell us a good joke.
I gotta grab some lunch here soon, so I don't have a whole lot left in me. I didn't do breakfast today. I'm kind of puny right now.
All right. Well, okay. So
we figured out the app, Tim.
We figured out the app. That was a huge victory for us.
You figured out the app and held my hand and walked me through it. Is what happened.
So
like everything we do with technology.
Our plan is to do this every Monday morning live, and that'll take a number of hours off my plate of editing.
Yeah, you have to edit everything.
So it'll just be edited as we're done. Hit that close out button. So I'm excited. This is another step. Everything's a step. We always say we're trying to grow a lot of different things, and we always say it's like do a million things just a little bit better. And that's
1% better.
It's not. There's no golden bullet. There's just a bunch of things and try to raise the tide. And now going live, I think is going to be a good thing. And they'll be available for viewing after the fact. And so we're going to continue to do these. We love doing it. This is fun. Isn't it fun doing these podcasts? And I hope that you guys enjoy them. And, give us some, if you have suggestions of what you think we should talk about. I mean, we are both musicians and artists and songwriters, and we haven't really dwelled on that much recently, although we did write a great song. Oh, we wrote a great song, Gold in the Ohio, about Muhammad Ali and how he won the gold in the Rome Olympics and came back and was a second-class citizen, couldn't eat in a restaurant because Louisville was 1960 Louisville before 1968. And he threw his gold medal into the Ohio River, and that is one of our better songs. And that's a good song, Jimmy.
Great
I think we did. Yeah, so we can't
be releasing a lot of that stuff as we go. So everybody keep an eye on that.
All right.
Thanks for watching. Listen.
Right. Jimmy D and the Wolf. See you next time.
Be kind. Peace.